Talk to me a little bit about your background and when you shifted to new science, and what is new science?
I was a very fortunate scientist because back in 1968, I was learning how to clone stem cells. And back at that time, just a handful of people in the entire world even knew what a stem cell was. So I was in the right place at the right time to make some interesting discoveries. One of the most important things I found in my research was simply this, is that I was cloning stem cells. Stem cells are embryonic cells. They're in your body at this moment. Why would you have embryonic cells in your body if you're an adult? And the answer is, every day we lose, by normal attrition, hundreds of billions of cells normally die every day. Skin cells, hair cells, the entire lining of the digestive tract is replaced every 3 days. 1 trillion cells. Point. If I keep losing hundreds of billions of cells every day, in order to stay alive, I have to replace hundreds of billions of cells every day, and this is the job of a stem cell. Now, the idea of stem cell is just another word for embryonic cell. Because once you're born, you're no longer an embryo. I can't keep calling them embryonic cells, so we change them. Stem cell, but embryonic cell. What was the point? I put one stem cell in culture by itself. It divides every 10 or 12 hours. At first there's 1, then 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, doubling every 10 hours. After a week, I have 50,000 cells in a petri dish, but the most important fact is they're all genetically identical because they came from one parent. So I have 50,000 genetically identical cells. That's not the experiment. This is. I split the cells into 3 different petri dishes. And what I do is I change the chemical composition of the culture medium in each of the 3 dishes, so it has slightly different culture medium. Well, what is culture medium? Culture medium is the equivalent of blood. So if I'm growing mouse cells, then what I do is look at mouse blood, see what it's made out of, and then try to make a synthetic version of that called culture medium. If I'm growing human cells, then I look at the composition of human blood and create culture medium based on that. So here's the point. Genetically identical cells in 3 dishes, but slightly different environment because of the chemistry. In one dish, the cells form muscle. In a second dish, the cells form bone. And in a third dish, the cells form fat cells. Significance? What controls the fate of the cells? Point? They were all genetically identical. The environment is what was selecting the genetic activity of the cells. And this is completely different than what I was teaching at the same time medical students, the concept of genetic determinism, that their characteristic, their traits, behavior, emotions, all of these characteristics are related to the presence of their genes. But it turns out this is not true. It's really related to the environment. What is the profound significance of the research? Simple. If genes control your life, and as far as we know, we didn't pick the genes we came with, and if we don't like the traits we have, you can't change the traits that you have, then you're stuck with your genes, and the genes control your life. Point, you're a victim of your heredity. If there's cancer or Alzheimer's or diabetes running in your family and you get the genes, you will anticipate that you too will have the same outcome. So that makes us victims when we say genes control our lives. What does the new research that I found in the stem cell study show us? The answer is this. By changing the environment, I change the expression of the cells. Well, what's the point? I'm the one that can change the environment. I am the master of my genetics. I am not the victim of my genes. I'm the one that can change the environment, and more importantly, my perception of the environment. And that is what controls the fate of the cells.
So your perception about the environment controls the activity of the cell.
The nature of biology is simple. Biological organisms adapt their biology to fit into an environment. So a cell reads an environment and then adjusts its genetics and its activity to conform to the environment. Now we have a problem, and that is this. Let's say I'm looking at the activity of my liver cells in the body. And I say, well, my liver cells should be adjusting to what's going on in the environment. And I say, well, how does a liver cell know what's going on in the environment? And the answer is this. The liver cell is not touching the environment. It depends on the nervous system to send information about the environment inside the body so the cells adjust their biology to match what's going on in the world. Well, we only have one problem in that, and that is this. Consciousness is an interpretation. So my mind is interpreting the environment. and then sending not the real information about the environment, but my interpretation of the environment. What's relevant? Well, I could live in a perfectly healthy, happy environment that will support me. But if I perceive it's a negative environment, then my cells inside my body do not know that it is a healthy environment. They only see the perception that I send to them. And this is why perception becomes so important, is because the cells are not directly touching the environment and depend on the nervous system's interpretation to adjust their biology. So if I change my perception, my mind, change my belief about life, I change the signals that are going in and adjusting the function of the cell. The point is very, very significant, and that is this. I'm not a victim of my genes because I, by my ability to change my environment and by my ability to change my perception of the environment, have the ability to control my genetic activity. I'm not a victim of my heredity. I'm a master of my genetic activity.
So how do we change our perception of the environment?
In understanding how we deal with the environment and deal with perception, the most important fact that we have to bring up at this point is that there's a mind between the environment and my cells. And when I say the mind, everyone thinks of a single entity, the mind. And I go, well, not actually true. For this reason, the mind is comprised of two interdependent elements that work together. And they have different functions, and they learn in different ways. It is our unawareness of that that is creating the problem. Because when we talk about the mind, we think there's just one thing. I say, no, there are two minds with different perceptions and different beliefs and attitudes about life. And that's the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. The difference is profound. The conscious mind, the latest evolution of the brain, is the creative mind. I say, tell me what you want from your life. Creativity is the response of the conscious mind. That's the one that can see into the future. And so that's really what makes humans so much more powerful than lower organisms, because the creative conscious mind allows us not to have just stimulus response like lower animals. Between the stimulus and the response, I have creativity. I can change any way I respond to life. I am the master of that. So it's the creative mind that has helped us get into the world that we have today. And I say, well, what's the other mind? I say the subconscious mind. I say, that's a record playback mind. It's basically a habit mind. I learn a behavior, and once it's in there, I push the button, and every time I push the button, the behavior will play. If it's a good behavior or bad behavior, that's irrelevant. It will always play the same behavior. So when I look at the world, I could look at it through my conscious mind and employ wishes and desires to say, this is what I want for my life. Or, as most of us are doing it, and unknowingly so, when we look at the world, we're actually operating through the subconscious mind, the programs of how to interpret life and how to respond to life. And why is this relevant? And the answer is this. The programs in the subconscious mind primarily came from downloading other people's behaviors. Your mother, your father, your siblings, your community. In the first 7 years of life, you were downloading behavior by observing other people. And therefore, the fundamental behavioral responses in your subconscious mind are not your wishes and desires. They're actually just copies of other people's behavior. And the problem is then, if I'm operating from my conscious mind, I'm controlling my life in the way I want to do it. But when I'm operating from the subconscious mind, I'm in automatic behavior, but playing programs that I acquired from other people, which do not necessarily benefit me. And then the last important aspect is this. You might say, well, then why would I run from the subconscious mind? I could just use my conscious mind. I go, it's a very good idea, except for this problem. When we are thinking, the conscious mind gets engaged. Simple point. I say, tell me what you're doing Monday at 2 o'clock. If you actually contemplate that, think about it simply this. Where's the answer? It's not out here. It's in here. So the moment I ask myself, what am I doing on Monday at 2 o'clock? My consciousness is directed inwards, a little Rolodex. What's going on? I say, yeah, but the moment I'm thinking, then it means I'm not paying attention. I go, absolutely true. So does it mean when I'm thinking, I stop doing something until my thought's over? So I'm walking down the street, have a thought, stop, Thoughts finished, now I can go walking again. I go, no, this is the critical part. When the conscious mind is engaged in thinking, the subconscious is the default program, the autopilot. So my conscious mind could be engaged, but my subconscious mind will carry out whatever chore I'm doing, walking, driving the car, communicating with another person. I don't need my conscious mind for that. I already have programs of how to do all those things. So the point is this: when we are thinking, we are not using the conscious mind in controlling our lives, which is the potential personal control. When we are thinking, we default to subconscious programs. And I say, well, here's where the problem comes from. A, the programs that are playing from the subconscious came from other people. B, most of the programs, 70% or so of these programs, are negative, disempowering, and self-sabotaging. C, when I'm playing these programs, the reason I'm playing subconscious program is because my conscious mind is engaged in thought 95% of the day. I go, relevant? If the conscious mind is engaged in thought and I'm playing a subconscious program, then I am the one that does not observe my own behavior. Why? Because my observation is inside my head thinking. And so the automatic behavior that's playing is unobserved by myself. That means 95% of the day, we are not operating from the conscious mind's wishes and desires or what we want. 95% of the day, because we're in thought, we're operating from subconscious default. I go, relevance? Well, since most of those programs are negative and disempowering and self-sabotaging, and it's invisible, it says, and every day I get up and I say, today I'm going out for my wishes and desires. I'm going to find love. I'm going to find the best job I can. I'm going to find health. This is my intention, my wish, and my desire. And I go, we go out in the morning, full steam, and we come home at night, tail between our legs. It didn't happen today. And we look around and go, well, it's not me, because I went out with the vision for success. So I'm a victim. My life is not under my control, and I am not successful because of the universe is not helping me. That's the perception. And it turns out, oh my gosh, that's completely wrong. 95% of the day, you were shooting yourself in the foot with bad subconscious programs. And at the end of the day, you look at your bloody foot and go, who did that? And you did it yourself. So what's the new biology? New biology says that we are running from programs 95% of the time. Most of the programs are negative, disempowering, self-sabotaging. That when we do operate from consciousness, when we put our hands on the wheel and drive the vehicle with wishes and desires, what do you think we manifest? The answer is wonderful. Because science has found out the one time people do this without even knowing they're doing this is when they fall in love. Because when they fall in love, they stay conscious. The reason is simple. The thing you've been looking for your whole life shows up in front of your face. Why are you going to let your mind wander now? This is what I want. This is why I'm here. I go, well, interesting. Because when you fall in love, that first period, the exciting period, I call the honeymoon. I say, think about it. Life was beautiful. No matter how crazy your life was, up till the day you meet this person, you fall in love. The next day, heaven on earth. Everything is beautiful. Life is great. Life is wonderful. You're so in love. And then during that love period, I say, how's life? You go, I love my life. Life is great. Life is wonderful. I go, well, the day before you met this person, it didn't seem to be that way. And now you meet this person, now your life has changed. What happened? And the answer is so simple. Science has recognized the moment we fall in love like that, we stay mindful, we stay conscious. Relevant? Then we keep our hands on the wheel with the conscious mind, driving for what? Wishes and desires. What is the honeymoon? Manifestation of wishes and desires. Why? Because that's what I'm operating from. And I say, yeah, but unfortunately the honeymoon doesn't last. And then it goes back to normal life. I go, yeah, and there's a simple understanding, and it goes like this. How did you create the honeymoon? You stayed mindful. You stopped thinking. When you were thinking, you defaulted to the bad programs. When you stayed mindful, you operate from wishes and desires. I go, this is great, but guess what? Even if you're in love, life is still going on. There's a point where You got to handle things. You got a job, you got chores, you got things to take care of, you got to fix the car. I go, so what happens when this happens during the honeymoon? I say, oh, I start thinking. I go, oh, I got to do this for the job. Oh, I have to take care of this chore. I go, consequence of thinking. I let go of control, and I go back to the default subconscious with the negative behaviors. And I go, and what is the consequence of that? You stop creating life from wishes and desires and return back to the programs that you had before you fell in love. And I go, why is this relevant to the honeymoon? Because your partner has never seen any of these negative behaviors since you fell in love. Why? Because you didn't default to the subconscious programs that you got from other people. And I go, well, that's called the honeymoon. Both of you are creating wishes and desires. And then I go, then what? I start thinking. I say, what happens when I think? I automatically go to autopilot. I go back to subconscious control. I go, yeah, but those behaviors aren't mine. All of a sudden, I start spewing out these negative behaviors. And my partner looks at me and goes, who are you? Where did that come from? Here's the problem. I'm the one who didn't even see what I just said. Why? I was thinking, defaulted to the auto program. My conscious mind, engaged in thought, did not even see the behavior I just played, which is primarily negative. My partner sees it, accuses me of, hey, who are you? And I'm thinking in my mind, what's she talking about? Why? Because I'm the one who didn't even see what I just said. And therefore, I get very defensive. What are you talking about? Who? I'm not like that. And I go, so what's the consequence? You fall in love, you become mindful, you create from wishes and desires, you manifest heaven on earth, and then I say what? Life intrudes. And when life intrudes, you start thinking. And the moment you start thinking, you start defaulting, autopilot, subconscious. And those programs come out without you even seeing what you just said. And apparently, because they're so negative, offended the people in your area, your partner. And the honeymoon becomes compromises. New behaviors show up that were never part of the honeymoon, and not very good behaviors at that. And what is your partner going to do in response to all of a sudden you start playing your mother or your father, and you don't see it, and your partner sees it, so what's going to happen? Your partner is the one that has to say, do I accept that behavior in this relationship? And I then say, well, you know, most of the time we have this honeymoon, that's really cool. And then sometimes this ugly thing comes out, and I go, okay, sometimes he's like that, so I'll compromise. I say, yeah, but that's only one behavior. As more of the subconscious behaviors come out, there are more compromises. And the more compromises, the farther away you are from the honeymoon. And all of a sudden, life is just the way it used to be before.
That's great. I wonder how it can be related to healing.
The most interesting observation from the clonal cells culture story is that the chemical composition of the culture medium determines the fate of the cells. I go, okay, but that's a plastic petri dish with cells in a plastic petri dish and synthetic medium. What does that have to do with real life? And the answer is simply this. When you look at yourself in the mirror and see yourself as a single entity, it's a total misperception. The simple truth is you're made out of 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entity. You, by absolute definition, are a community. So when I say the word Bruce, I'm not talking about a single entity. I'm talking about a single community of 50 trillion citizens. So the joke, a human is a skin-covered petri dish. And the culture medium inside is the blood. It doesn't make a difference to the cell's fate whether it's in a plastic dish or a skin dish. The cell's fate will be determined by the culture medium and the chemical composition of it. I go, oh, well then in my body, the original culture medium is blood. I go, yeah, and then what controls the chemistry of the blood? And I go, well, the brain is the chemist. And then the next and most obvious question is, then what chemistry should the brain release? I go, that's where the mind comes in. The mind reads the environment, makes an interpretation of the environment, and the brain translates that interpretation into the chemistry of the blood. My interpretation of life is what determines the chemical composition of my culture media in my blood. And that is what determines my genetics. As I change my thought, I change the chemistry. So, simple understanding. I'm sitting here, my eyes closed, I open them up, I see someone I love. The chemistry of love, the interpretation of love, is translated into some very interesting chemistry. Dopamine is the result of love, which is pleasure. Oxytocin results from love, which is bonding to the source of pleasure. Vasopressin, when you're in love, vasopressin is a chemical that is released into the blood that makes you more attractive to your partner. And most importantly, growth hormone. When you're in love, the brain releases growth hormone. And then why is this relevant? I say, because when you see somebody in love, you can say, look how they glow. See how healthy they are. And the fact is, this is not just an accident or coincidence. This is directly tied to the chemistry of the blood. So in love, I'm enhancing the health and growth of my cells. I say, well, wait, just to compare the difference. I'm sitting here, but when I open my eyes this time, I see something that scares me. Well, the image or interpretation of that threat is translated by the brain into totally different chemistry. When I see something that scares me, I release stress hormones and inflammatory agents. And I go, why is this relevant? Because the chemicals that are released in the perception of stress shut down the growth of the cells and actually inhibit the immune system. You say, well, why should I do that to my body? Why should I shut off the growth and shut off the immune system? The answer is simple. When you perceive a threat, in the old days in school we referred to that as activating the adrenal system, fight or flight. If you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, how much energy do you want to make available to run away from that tiger? Simple point. Give you an example. I have a bacterial infection and my immune system is demanding energy to fight the bacterial infection. It demands a lot of energy if you think about it, because when you're sick, how tired do you get? And the answer is the immune system is using energy that even tires you out. So, okay, here's the story. You have a bacterial infection and a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you. You're in charge of energy distribution, so how much of the energy you want to do to fight the bacteria and how much of the energy you want to do to run away from the tiger? I hope you get the answer, and the answer is, I want 100% of the energy to run away from the tiger. Why? Because if I can't escape the tiger, the bacterial infection is not even a problem for me anymore at that point. And the idea is this: when you're in fear, you take all the available energy of your body and use it for fight or flight purposes. You shut down growth and you shut down the immune system. And the chemistry of the blood will then redirect the genetics of the activity from growth into protection. They're mutually exclusive. You can't be in both at the same time. What determines the difference? First, your perception, and then how that perception is translated into chemistry by the brain. The chemistry goes into the growth medium called blood, which nourishes and directs the activity of 50 trillion cells in your skin-covered dish. And this is the significance of how a thought changes the genetics of your activity, because your thoughts are converted into chemistry by the brain.
That's great. And you said that 90% of all diseases and doctor visits are the result of stress. And obviously there's not tigers running around anymore, so people are perceiving life in a stressful way, and that's causing them to be sick.
If we can engender the concept of fear in somebody, your job is not secure, enemies may show up, your food is not healthy, pollution is threatening you, the perception of fear will release chemistry that will, as I said, shut down growth and shut down the immune system. Well, I said, well, shutting down growth, I'm an adult, I don't need to grow. And I go, oh, every day you have to replace hundreds of billions of cells that die every day. So yes, I don't care what age you are, you have to grow every day. And then you say, yeah, but if fear shuts down growth, this interferes with my life. And I go, yes, but here's the point. When we evolved as humans, the fear response was only used very briefly and intermittently. If the tiger showed up, I'm going to be in fear and I'm going to run, fight or flight. But once I get away from the tiger, I go back to normal health and growth again. So in the old days, fear was only used for a very short period of time. So if you're going to shut off growth in the immune system for a short period of time, it's not really relevant. the stresses of today's world are 24/7, 365. They never let up. And that means every day you are compromising your growth because of the stress hormones, and every day you're compromising the action of the immune system. The net result is illness and disease. That is the only consequence that will come from the chemistry of fear. And yet, look at the world today. We are driven and motivated by fear every day, all day.
Yeah. For instance, if you get a diagnosis of cancer, you immediately go to fear. Fear of death, fear of dying, fear of losing your loved ones. And fear is the worst place you can go.
To understand how the mind controls biology, let's talk about something that everybody's familiar with called the placebo effect. And I say, what's that? I say, well, I have an illness. A doctor says, here's a brand new medicine. It's the most spectacular new medicine for your illness. It's even colored purple, so it's even more powerful. And that this medicine is going to heal you. Okay, I have bought into what? The perception that this drug is going to heal me. I take the drug, I get better. And then later I find out that the drug was a sugar pill, a placebo. So there's only one important question to ask, and that is then what healed me? The sugar pill? The answer is no. Sugar pill didn't do anything. It was your belief in the sugar pill that healed you. Okay, so not the pill, it was belief. And everybody says, yeah, I'm familiar with that. That's the equivalent of what you might call positive thinking. A placebo is positive thinking. This is going to heal you, and it does. I go, great. Here's the bigger problem. When everyone seems to be aware of the placebo effect, the result of positive thinking, the important question is this: what is the consequence of negative thinking? Guess what? It's equally powerful in influencing your life as is positive thinking, but it works in the opposite direction. While a placebo, positive thinking, can cure you of anything, a nocebo, negative belief, can actually cause any illness and can cause death just because you believe that. And this becomes important because if you leave out the role of negative belief, then you've left out what is the most influential character of our lives, because psychologists will tell you most of our beliefs are negative and disempowering. And therefore, every day, our negative thinking is taking away our health. Why? It releases the stress hormones that shut down growth and the immune system, opening us up for disease. So belief, positive or negative, is equally powerful in shaping your life. They just work in opposite directions.
So the danger of a diagnosis.
The unfortunate situation that we deal with on a day-by-day basis is that we live by the programs most of our lives, 95% of it. The significant aspect of health is that most people growing up acquire behavior associated with the fact that when somebody's sick, they have to go to the doctor. Mommy's sick, she has to go to the doctor. You're sick, you have to go to the doctor. I say, what program does a child under 7 learn from this? And the answer is this: when it comes to my health, I'm not the one that is responsible for taking care of it. The doctor is. And why is that relevant? Because then we buy the doctor's opinion as truth. And since the function of the mind is to take our belief, our truth as we see it, and convert it into biology, then a negative truth can be turned into a negative biology. Most diagnoses are very negative. So in a sense, that's the equivalent of a nocebo effect, a negative belief that occupies your mind. And I go, so a doctor says to a patient, listen, you have about 3 months left to live. What's relevant about that is, does the patient actually have only 3 months left to live? Or did the death sentence prescribed by the doctor occur in 3 months? Will it occur in that 3 months? And the answer is almost pretty close to the 3 months. You say, well, the doctor knew he was dying in 3 months. I go, no, the doctor actually prescribed the death in 3 months. Why? The mind was programmed with a nocebo, negative belief. I only have 3 months left. That's a clock that counts backwards now. And it says the time is unfolding. The destination is going to translate the belief, a terminal illness, into a reality. So a person could get a misdiagnosis, they got the wrong diagnosis. The doctor picks up the wrong folder, sits down, tells the patient, geez, I'm sorry, you got 3 months left to live. You've got this cancer. It's all through your body, blah, blah, blah. The patient actually doesn't have that. But guess what? The diagnosis will put into the mind a program of cancer. And the function of the mind is to take the image and translate it into chemistry, which then controls the cells. Most diagnoses are very negative diagnoses. It's not diagnoses like, oh, you're going to do well and you're healing and wonderful and life is great. Almost all of them have a negative outcome. I say, placebo, nocebo, what is it? It's consciousness controlling biology. If you give your power to somebody else and buy their truth, then their truth becomes your biology. If I wanted to simplify this in the most simple, fundamental way as possible, it is this. Most of us, when we were young, played with something called paint by numbers. And paint by numbers, you get a picture which is all broken up into little pieces with numbers in them, each of the pieces, and the numbers reflect a color in the paint set. And then you take the color number and fill in that color into the spot, and lo and behold, you become Picasso. You create this giant picture. Here's the simple conclusion. The function of the brain, consciousness, and health is paint by numbers in reverse, meaning start with a picture in the mind, and the brain will break down the picture into numbers, but the numbers don't reflect pigments, color. They reflect neurohormones, neurosecretions. What's the point? The mind takes a picture, the brain converts the picture into chemistry, which then adjusts the body to make a three-dimensional image of the picture. We start with a picture in our mind and create a body that matches the picture. If there's a diagnosis that's negative, then you start with a negative diagnosis. The mind will then use that picture and the brain will translate that picture into chemistry that will manifest the diagnosis. Doctor says you're going to die in about 3 months. You will die in approximately 3 months. Not because it was necessary, but because the image, the nocebo, the negative belief, will be turned into biology.
So do you want to talk about why the Western medical philosophy of drugs and surgery isn't sustainable?
For the longest time, especially when we were understanding the nature of genetics, we implied that every characteristic of the human was associated with the genetics that they possess. Well, that means not just the good, positive, healthy characteristics, but the negative ones as well. So that every time we saw an illness, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, we immediately went to the fact that there must be some genes that are responsible for this illness. And therefore, what we want to do is change the genes, the activity, and that's where the pharmaceutical industry wants to give us medicine and drugs and chemicals to change how the cells read the information. Well, it turns out, simple fact, scientific fact, less than 1% of disease is connected to genetics. And why is that relevant? Well, if you're going to try to influence genetics and affecting disease, you can at best influence 1% of disease. So what about the 90% of disease or more that people express? And I go, that is actually due to lifestyle. So what are we finding out? The biggest killers on our planet today, cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, these diseases are not organic problems in our body. These diseases are the consequence of how we are responding to the world around us, that it is based on lifestyle. 90% or more of cardiovascular disease has nothing organically wrong with the individual. It's just the consequence of dealing with stress. Cancer, we always were looking for genes that cause cancer, and the Human Genome Project really squashed that idea. Why? There are no cancer genes. There is no gene that causes cancer. Everything that we call a cancer gene is actually a gene related to stress. That when we stress the situation, this gene then can precipitate the cancer. So it doesn't cause a disease, a gene, but it is correlated with a disease. And this is very important because when we give the gene the power, then we focus our attention on the gene as the source of the problem. This is where medicine is coming from today. And guess what? With all the work they've done, let's say, for example, with cancer, how many billions of dollars have we used to look for the cancer gene to find there is no cancer gene? Okay? And guess what? Even the American Cancer Society has now come around to say between 70 to 90% of cancer is totally lifestyle. Again, this puts responsibility back on us not on our genes. Because when you say the genes did it, then you're just saying, I'm a victim, and somebody has to heal me. And I'm going, you're not a victim, you're the creator. And you can create cancer, and you can create health, whether you have the BRCA gene or not. You can create cancer or cardiovascular disease, or, in fact, 100% of diabetes type 2 has nothing to do with genetics and everything to do with lifestyle. Point. Conventional medicine, tied up in an old belief system, is locked into the cause of illness, is tied into our genetics and our biochemistry. And therefore, the pharmaceutical industry is the great savior. Why? Because it'll make the chemistry that should bring us back to health again. Well, it turns out that's totally false. As a matter of fact, the pharmaceutical industry is one of the leading causes of death in the United States today, with over 300,000 people dying from prescription drugs daily in a year. So what's the relevance? The relevance is this. We are not victims, we are the creators. If we put stress in our lives, then we manifest disease. And if we remove stress from our lives, we can remove disease. The concept of spontaneous remission is real. People can have full-out cancer, be put on a death watch, and then overnight, get rid of the cancer. By what? Changing their perception and beliefs about life, not changing the genetics. Does this mean medicine is all negative? And I go, absolutely not. Medicine does miracles with trauma. If I physically hurt myself, I get in a car accident, and my guts are hanging out, don't send me to a chiropractor. And I don't need a massage therapist. And homeopathy is really not going to help. I want a surgeon. And so trauma or changing parts or replacing parts, physical things like that, that's where medicine makes miracles. But diseases, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, all these conventional kinds of diseases are not connected to trauma. They're connected to mind.
Okay, so what about like a pathogen or an invader, or like Lyme? Is there ever a time where antibiotics are necessary and good?
Our immune system can fight off virtually everything. Then the question is, then how come we get sick sometimes if my immune system can fight it off? And I answer it with this. The action or function of the immune system is tied directly to our perception of life. If we see stress hormones inhibit the immune system. How effective? When doctors want to transplant an organ from person A to person B, they want to transplant a heart or a kidney or a lung. The recipient, before receiving the organ, is given stress hormones. The relevance? The stress hormones inhibit the function of the immune system. So the doctor gives the patient the stress hormones and then transplants the organ. Why? Once the organ is put in, the foreign organ, and the immune system is now shut down by stress hormones, then I'm not rejecting the foreign organ. So the idea about it is the effectiveness of shutting off the immune system is so great with stress that the medical profession uses it therapeutically to inhibit the immune system when I want to transplant an organ. So basically it says, yeah, guess what stress does when you're not transplanting an organ? It will shut down the immune system. So therefore, if you are under stress and you have, let's say, a bronchitis, an infection in the lungs, which personally I had, and I had to look at the world and I go, wow, I'm getting sicker because the bacteria is gaining on me. Why? Because at that moment my life was under a lot of stress. I had two choices. Immediately eliminate all the stress from my life or take an antibiotic like penicillin. Looking at my situation, realizing my life stresses at that moment, of course, I went for the penicillin. Why? Not that I need to stay on it for a long time. I just needed help to kick the infection enough so that I could gather my own internal strength and activate my own immune system to manage this infection. So, yeah, there are times when drugs are very important. If you are losing the battle, then do something to stem the battle. Use an antibiotic if you have to. But that's only in rare cases. And this is profoundly important. Human beings were once considered just to be organisms comprised of human cells. But today we find that there are as many microbes, bacteria, parasites, in our body as human cells. And the relevance is, are they invaders? And the answer is no. We cannot live without them. If you remove the bacteria called the microbiome, which is the community of bacteria that live within us, and each one of us is carrying about 2 pounds or more of bacteria in our body at any one moment. If you eliminate the bacteria, you will die. Relevance? The bacteria are not an adjunct to our life. They are required for our life. So science has actually given a new name to a human. We're not just an organism. We're now called a superorganism. Relevance? The microbiome, the bacteria in your body, are required for your digestion and running your system. There's a feedback between the bacteria and the genes of your own body. They're in community. There are good bacteria, which your community is going to harbor and keep in you because these bacteria are required for your health. And there are bad bacteria. Well, the immune system will fight the bad bacteria, and guess what? Even your good bacteria will fight the bad bacteria. So basically, as a superorganism, we have to recognize that the bacteria provide a fundamental part of our life. Without them, we will die. Well, this brings up the issue of the overprescription of antibiotics. Because when you give a person antibiotics, they indiscriminately kill all the microbes. And if you are depleted of these microbes, then you will not get well. So the understanding is this: we should only use antibiotics in very extreme situations and not given as an everyday way of healing a person, because they're destructive of the microbiome, which is the functional part of our lives. What's interesting in our world today is the state of health crisis that we face in spite of the massive medical system that we're living with. We have the most money going into healthcare than any country in the world today, and we have some of the worst statistics of healthcare. And I go, where's the problem? Obviously, if I keep investing in healthcare, I should get healthier. And the answer is, the problem is this: conventional medicine is predicated on the pharmaceutical industry. That we find a disease, we anticipate the pharmaceutical industry will make a magic bullet and deal with it. Yet it turns out there are so few diseases that are actually organic. The diseases that we express mainly on this planet are due to the stress and the lifestyle. So if I go into a doctor with an illness and they look at me and say, oh, your machine is not working and I'm going to put chemicals into your body and fix it, well, that's a nice vision, except for the problem is over 90% of illness has nothing to do with an organic breakdown of the body. And that's why our reliance on the pharmaceutical industry is interfering with healthcare. And I say, why should the pharmaceutical industry interfere with our healthcare? And the answer is simple. The pharmaceutical industry is a corporate industry. Corporations. What are corporations? They're systems where people invest money so they can make a profit. I go, wait a minute. Healthcare is a profit-motivated industry? And I go, of course it is. People invest in it. The relevance is simply this, is that the pharmaceutical industry makes money off of the medical industry. And as long as we are convinced that the answers to our problems in the pharmaceutical industry, then we will seek them as our healer. The problem is that most illness has nothing to do with that. I go, well, then why isn't medical school keeping up with the new information? And then I have to unfortunately admit that our healthcare system has been preopted by the interests of the pharmaceutical industry. I say I could heal with thinking and thought and energy healing, which is the new phase of healing. I go, why is the pharmaceutical industry against that? And the answer is simple. I can't unitize it and monetize it. How can you make a pill of energy? Can you sell me a capsule of energy? And the answer is no. Well, then, is energy of relevance to the pharmaceutical industry? And the answer is absolutely not. Matter of fact, if they could eliminate all the energy, they would be very happy because then they'd be back to selling chemicals again. But most of the illness in our planet will not be resolved through chemical healing. And the medical industry is biased by the money of the pharmaceutical industry, which is one of the largest corporations in the world. The significance of this is very profound. The word human, humane, humanity, the root of all these words is compassion. Somebody taking care of somebody else. And I say, well, then medicine must be a humane industry. And I go, that's an unfortunate situation because medicine today is an inhumane industry. He said, medicine is inhumane? I go, yeah, why? And I go, simple. There's a shareholder who's making money off of you being sick. I go, how did they make money off of you being sick? Because the industry charges you more money than it takes to heal you. That extra money goes to the profit. And I say, oh wait, then a sick person who's already kicked and down is being kicked again. Why? Because you're making a profit off of somebody who's sick. I go, well, this is the complete opposite of compassion. And since compassion is humane, the opposite is inhumane. And today, the medical industry in the United States, by definition, is inhumane because it's not caring for the sick, it's caring for the profit motivation of the corporations.
And I think it's important for people to know that if you take a pill for symptom or condition A, it's going to throw off system B, C, and D because it's all connected.
When you look at the biology, there was an old way of perceiving biology, and that was linear. A goes to B, goes to C, goes to D, conclusion. If there's something wrong with the conclusion, then you can go back and adjust A or adjust B or adjust C and adjust D, and then you can affect the conclusion. So the pharmaceutical industry looks at an illness as a conclusion and says, which can I adjust along the way? The only problem with that is the concept of a linear flow of information does not exist. While we're talking A goes to B, goes to C, goes to D in linear flow, what we know is this: they're all interconnected like that. A is connected to B, yes, but it's also connected to C, and it's also connected to D, and D is connected to A, and B and C. They're all interconnected. And I say, why is it relevant? Because if I change one, I don't change a linear flow, A, B, C, D, and I change the N. I change one, I've made a network. And this network is going to alter the outcome in many different ways. So in your pharmaceutical information sheet, it says this drug was made to do this A, B, C, D, make the conclusion better. And I go, and then there are 5 pages of side effects. I go, what are the side effects? And I say, that's a euphemism. They're direct effects. They're direct effects because an integration of a network like that means you pull on one, you're going to affect all the other ones. And they call those side effects because that was not the intention of the drug when they manufactured it. But unfortunately, the same drugs are used throughout the body for different functions. Hormone replacement therapy in women has now been programmed out of our medical community for a simple reason. Oh, estrogen is being lost in menopausal women, and this provides for the problems of emotion and physiology changes around menopause. So you say, oh, well, great. Let's just put estrogen back into the system, and everything will be balanced again. And I go, well, where's the problem? They go, well, estrogen is indeed involved with the reproductive tract and especially with female sexual drive and all that activity. And I go, well, that's true. And I go, hey, but there's estrogen in males. Yeah, what's it doing there? I go, oh, estrogen has other influences as well in the heart and in the brain. Estrogen signals are not related to anything sexual at all. It's related to blood flow. Significance. If you add the estrogen because you want to affect the reproductive system, that estrogen is in the body. It's going to affect anything that estrogen affects, which is what? Blood flow in the heart, blood flow in the brain. What did they find out? Hormone replacement therapy has side effects of what? Stroke and heart attacks. And I go, side effect? No, that's a direct effect of putting estrogen in the system, but not focusing it to go to the reproductive tract. You put it in the whole system. In my biology, if I were a female, I would release estrogen at my reproductive tract and not release it all over the body. Why? It affects the ovary different than it affects the heart. And so what's the problem? Pharmaceutical industry looks at the destination that it wants to fix and ignores the fact that when you add a drug, there are multiple drug interactions which are not side effects but direct effects that throw people off. And we find that the largest problem with medication are the side effects, which contribute to the 300,000 people that die every year from prescription drugs.
It's insane. So on that note, let's address the statin and cholesterol issue.
Okay.
What is cholesterol?
One of the findings that has shaped the medical response to atherosclerosis is the fact that plaques of tissue and cells build up in our blood vessels, which then lead to heart attacks and strokes. When the medical profession started to look at this area of damage where these plaques are found in the blood vessel, the first thing they found was that all of the cells were filled with cholesterol. And immediately they said, oh my goodness, cholesterol is associated with the plaques. And they immediately then took the jump, since cholesterol is in every plaque, that cholesterol is the cause of the problem. Well, we now know something very important. Cholesterol is a very fundamental, major component of the cell membrane, which is the brain of the cell. And functioning in our brain is tremendous amount of cholesterol. The brain is white. It's not red. It's white because it's got so much fat in it, which is cholesterol is part of it. I go, so we have been blaming cholesterol as causing the problem. What has science found out? The cholesterol shows up after the problem has already started. So it marks which cells are sick, but it did not cause them. So by focusing and saying that cholesterol is the cause, and then putting dietary restrictions on cholesterol, saying cholesterol is your problem, cut out the cholesterol from your diet. Well, there's a problem with that. Two problems. A, cholesterol is vital to the system. And if you take it out of the system is going to be deprived and it's not going to work very well. B, the problem in atherosclerosis is not the cholesterol. I said, what is the problem in atherosclerosis? Stress. Stress causes erratic blood flow. When the blood is going down the blood vessel, it pushes down the blood vessel. It pushes like pressure on the blood vessel cells. There's blood pressure. I go, the cells read the blood pressure. If the pressure is too high, the cells are encouraged to divide, meaning this. If a blood vessel is very narrow and a large amount of blood is trying to get through that blood vessel, there's a lot of pressure. So I say, how can I reduce the pressure? And the answer is, make more cells and make the blood vessel wider. So if I'm under stress and I'm increasing the blood pressure because of my stress, my cells where the stress is being felt are saying, oh my goodness, we need to make more cells to make the blood vessel bigger to reduce the stress. But the problem is stress is erratic. So it's not continuous stress. There's stress and then there's no stress. And there's stress and there's no stress. I say, what? I go, when the stress is occurring, the cells respond by dividing. When the stress stops for that moment, the cells stay there, but they don't go anywhere. The next time the stress comes, they divide again. Why? Because they were going to make the blood vessel bigger. So the issue is the plaque of cells that are found on the blood vessels, or in the blood vessels, those plaques are the result of intermittent stress stimulating the cells to make a bigger blood vessel, but then when the stress is gone, the vessel says, well, I don't need to be any bigger than this, so now I'm piling up these cells. The result is this. I keep telling the system I need more cells. The system later says you don't need the cells. The cells are piling up. They begin, after a while, to not be very healthy. They absorb cholesterol. Then you see the cholesterol in the cells. And that is where the cholesterol came into the story. Point. The cholesterol came into the story after the damage already occurred. So regulating cholesterol wasn't the problem. It's regulating stress is the problem. So we've been misdirected. That people take statin drugs. Why? I'm going to bring down the bad cholesterol in my body. I go, okay, let's look at the data. And the data is clear and unambivalent in this. And the data is this. About 3%, in other words, simply 3 out of 100 people on a prescription of statin drugs have any benefit from the drug. And those 3 happen to be the worst off patients. Those are the ones right on the edge of that heart attack. 97 people taking that drug out of 100 do not have any positive effect from the statin drugs. But there are side effects. And the side effects affect anywhere between 15 and 23% of the people. So I say, okay, now let's look at the result of taking statin drugs. 3 out of 100 people will get well. And somewhere about 20 to 25 people will get sick from taking the statin drug. So the issue is, where's the benefit? And the answer is, there is no benefit except for the drug company, which has a lifetime prescription. They are drug dealers, and they hook the patient to believe that this drug is helping them, when in fact, the data clearly reveals there are more people injured by the drug than are actually helped by the drug.
So cholesterol is not the bad guy.
What happens periodically is those people in charge change the level of cholesterol that is acceptable. They keep lowering the number. And why is that relevant? Because every time they lower the acceptable number for the cholesterol, they increase the number of prescriptions 1,000,000 times or more. And therefore, every time they lower the cholesterol number, the drug company makes a huge gain in profit, and the people lose more.
Where did they come up with this number?
It's based on the fact that they say there's a number for the average person. I go, well, then what is the average person? I say, there are people at this end of the spectrum and people at this end of the spectrum. Where's average? Right here in the middle. I say, well, then if a person is at this end of the cholesterol spectrum and you say they should be here in the middle, does that mean that this person should bring their cholesterol level to the middle? And the answer is, absolutely not. That person's not average. Who's average? The guy in the middle is average. There is no average human number. And once you try to create an average human number, what you've done is taken the extremes and say, oh, they're not in the average anymore, so they need drug treatment. And the fact is, you're creating an average number for a mythical human. There is no average mythical human. We're just making up the numbers as we go. Very recently, the FDA has taken cholesterol off the restricted dietary list for the simple reason they finally recognize dietary cholesterol has no impact on atherosclerosis.
It's insane. Can you talk a little bit about energy?
When science first evolved in the West, it evolved with the work primarily of Isaac Newton. And Isaac Newton's work was trying to understand the mechanics of the universe. And the relevance about Isaac Newton's work is this. He was trying to predict the movements of the planets in our solar system. Now remember, at the time of Isaac Newton, the church was running civilization and they had the belief that God was manipulating everything on this planet like we are marionettes and the stars and the planets move according to God's whim and all that kind of stuff like that. But Isaac Newton looked at it as if it was a mechanism, a machine. And why is it relevant? Because he put physical data into his equation to understand the movement of the planets, the size of a planet, the mass of a planet, the acceleration of the planet, the vector in which it's moving, physical things. And using that was able to accurately predict the movements of the planets in the solar system, which was way beyond the church's understanding. And why was it relevant? Because Isaac Newton did not put invisible forces in his theory, and therefore came to a simple conclusion. You can understand how the universe works without including the invisible realm, spirit, energy, or whatever you want to call it. You can just study the physical realm and you will understand how it works. Medicine, being derived from Newtonian physics, looks at the body as a physical device, and that if there's anything wrong with it, it is a consequence of a problem in the mechanics of a physical machine. I say, well, this is really cool until 1925. In 1925, a new physics came in, quantum physics. What's the relevance of quantum physics? Well, it said that invisible energy realm that was out there that we did not count and even talk about in medicine because it's just a physical body. It turns out our perception of what is physical is an illusion. We're not physical at all. And then there's somebody out there in this moment looking at me on the screen going, well, if you're not physical, how come I could see you? The answer is very simple. The lights are on. And everybody laughs. What does that mean? Lights are on. I go, no, here's the point. Photons of light, when they hit the energy of my body, are reflected back. So when you see me, you're not seeing me, the energy. You're seeing my surface bouncing photons back. So you're seeing light reflected off. You're seeing a reflection of me. Beneath that surface, where the photons are, there's nothing physical at all. It's all energy. This is the nature of quantum physics. An atom, when you take it apart, oh yeah, they said the atom was the smallest physical unit. Then they started to take it apart and they found, oh, there are electrons, protons, and neutrons, smaller particles. But the world changed when the physicists said, what are the smaller particles made out of? What's an electron made out of? What's a proton made out of? And when they looked inside, there was nothing inside but energy. And all of a sudden the world changed because it said, everything that we looked at as being physical is just another form of energy. Relevance? Well, then there's energy that looks physical, and there's energy that's invisible. I go, what's the relevance? In quantum physics, both of them are connected. That the invisible is actually, in quantum physics, referred to as the field. Lynn McTaggart wrote a wonderful book on the field, the invisible energy. Well, why is this relevant? And the answer is this quote from Albert Einstein: the field, the invisible energy, the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. Particle is matter. So what was Einstein saying? The invisible energy is the sole governing agency of what we call particles. The body is particle. Yeah, but it's influenced by the soul control from the invisible energy. I said, okay, what's the definition of the word field? Invisible, moving forces that influence the physical world. I go, yep, that's the definition of physics of field. And I go, interesting. Long time ago, the word spirit was what? Invisible, moving forces that influence the physical realm. Quantum physics is taking us back to a time that said the invisible forces that we have been discounting in medicine turn out to be the primary forces that control everything. And all of a sudden it says, then medicine as a Newtonian healing device, only dealing with the physical, the chemicals, the drugs, the surgery. Well, that's nice, but what about the invisible forces? They're not covered. And I say, well, what do they include? Mind, consciousness, these are the forces. And then I go, last thing, even the quantum physicists, when quantum physics was first established, acknowledged that while the universe looks like a giant machine, it's more accurate to consider it as a giant thought. It's all thought. And this is why, if you want to come back to the supreme power over our biology, it's thought, the invisible energy from our mind that not only shapes our body, but shapes our relationship to the world in which we live.
So frequency of thought and emotion. Can you talk about that and how different emotions and thoughts have different frequencies, which may lead to disease?
Well, conventional science has left out energy from the process. All of us have had very deep personal experiences of energy affecting our lives. And what I would like to do is give a name to that energy. And we refer to this energy in our personal experiences as good vibes and bad vibes. I go, what the heck does that mean? Well, vibration is energy. I say, what are good vibes versus bad vibes? Well, the first thing we have to do is step back and say this, that while we perceive ourselves as physical beings, the truth is we are energy beings. Simple as that. Energy is life. People know that. And I go, yeah, you lose energy, you lose life. I go, well, here's an interesting understanding. If I drop two rocks into a pond and the ripples from the rocks, which are the vision of energy, the ripples are not the physical energy, but it's the energy shaping the water. So the shape of the water as ripples is being shaped by invisible energy. Energy are waves. So the ripples of two rocks hitting the water, they're coming together. And as the ripples converge, the question is, what happens when the ripples hit each other? Do they just pass through, or does one affect the other? And the answer is, they interfere with each other. Ripples from rock A and the ripples from rock B have an interference when they interact. I say, well, there's two consequences of that interference. The extremes. Two energies come together and they add up and make greater energy. Or two energies come together and they cancel each other out and they flatten each other. I say, why is this relevant to life? And I go, simply this, energy is life. The more energy you have, the more you're going toward life. The less energy you have, the more you're going toward death. I go, in our life, we experience sometimes what is called good vibes. I say, what is that? I say, well, you go to this party and you're really tired, but by the time you get to the party, you meet these people, and the next thing you know, the music's playing, you're dancing, you're having all this energy. And I say, where did the energy come from? You came here and you were tired. I say, oh, I met these people and I was good vibes. And I say, what does it mean? I say, bodies are like ripples in a pond. They're energy. Remember, they're not physical. And I say the ripples of other people, when they're in harmony with you, two ripples in harmony, both going up, both going down, both going up, two ripples in harmony act on what is called constructive interference, meaning the value of the energy waves become added up. More power, better vibes, good vibes. Why is it good vibes? More energy, more life, less energy, less life. If you are feeling good vibes, by definition, you are enhancing your energy, which says this is a good place to be. But if you're feeling bad vibes, that's when two energies are not in phase. One ripple is going up, the other ripple is going down. When this one's going down, this one's going up. They're out of phase. I say, what happens when you add up two out of phase ones? They cancel each other out. So bad vibes is what? You're in the dark part of the city, you don't know where you really are, and all of a sudden you feel the energy drain out of your body. You feel weak. You feel vulnerable. It's called bad vibes. I said, what is it indicating? Your life is not supported in this environment. You want to go toward good vibes and away from bad vibes. I go, that is the secret of animal and plant communication all the way up through and including humans. Every organism on this planet reads vibration. Why? Life is energy. If an organism moves into some place where the energy is canceled, it's a feedback that says you are losing energy, which means you're losing your life force. In contrast, if you go this way and your energy is enhanced, then it says, oh, I'm getting more life going this way. So it's interesting. A snail doesn't have to go to school to know, should I eat this or not eat this? Should I go this way or not go that way? It doesn't have to go to school to learn that. All it has to do is read the energy. We, like every other organism, use energy as the primary communication. Am I safe or am I not safe? What, you feeling more power or are you feeling less power? Power is life. So the relevance of vibes is not a coincidence or an accident. It is one of the most important meters on our dashboard of life, because by reading that, you will know whether you're going toward your life or you're going toward or away from your life by losing your energy. And it's very interesting because humans have been programmed more or less in the first 7 years to ignore the vibration and listen to people's words. And I go, there's your problem. Vibrations are true. If it's a person's bad, they're going to just have bad vibes, but they can have wonderful words. So if you listen to the words, you're not feeling the vibes. And therefore, you've lost the most important communication that every organism on the planet is using. And that is, read the vibes first. How do you know if a person's your friend? You can feel it. If you don't feel it, but you listen to the words, you can be totally misled. Silver-tongued devil override the vibrational meter. And what we all have to come back to is learn vibes are information. Vibes enhance health when they're constructive interference. And vibes take away health when we live in what are called bad vibes. When we're trying to heal ourselves, what we're trying to do is improve our vitality. That's what healing is. When we're in disharmony and dis-ease, we have no vitality, and that's why people have no energy. And I said, well, what are you going to use to guide you toward this vitality? And I said, well, we have two minds, and each one is going to send us in a different direction. And the idea is that most people think, well, if I just have positive thoughts, this will heal me. And I go, theoretically, that is a very good idea, except for the problem is this: 95% of the day, the thoughts that we have are actually removing the conscious mind from controlling biology, because 95% of the day we're on autopilot. So a lot of people are practicing like positive thinking. I say, well, how long or how much of the day are you doing that? Well, obviously just a small percent of the day. And I go, well, that's a problem, because you're operating from the subconscious. It's got a negative program. It's operating 95% of the day. And this is the issue that people have, is because they think I'm going to do the positive thing. And I think, well, that's a good thought, but will it manifest? And the answer is not for a conventional person, because the conscious mind will only, in that average person, work about 5% at the most. Most people actually 1%. And the significance then is what you're doing helping you? The question is, well, is what you're doing based on the conscious mind or the subconscious mind? If it's based on the subconscious mind, then you're carrying all the baggage of the programming. And if it's on the conscious mind, well, that was the mind that gave you the honeymoon effect. That's the mind that gives people that glow of love, that health. Why? The conscious mind, when running it, will take you always toward that side. But the moment you start thinking and default to the subconscious is the moment you start invoking programs that will take away your health. and they'll be invisible, and you'll be the last one to know except for the sickness that you will manifest.
So, and you talked about having a purpose or service or gratitude. These are tools and practices that someone can do that can immediately change their chemistry.
In recent times, we started to find that there's actually the equivalent of a fountain of youth built into every cell. And this fountain of youth is associated with the DNA, but it's not the DNA that codes and makes programs. It's not genes. These are little extensions of the DNA at the end of the chromosomes called telomeres. And telomeres are just a mechanical aspect of copying the DNA. We need those telomeres to make full complements of our DNA. Every time you copy the DNA, in other words, every time the cell divides, it loses a piece of the telomere. Well, the telomeres, to give another picture, are like shoelaces. At the end of the shoelace, you have that little nice plastically coated thing that holds the strands of the shoelace together. If that little plastic falls off, the shoelace unfurls and the strands unfold. Telomeres keep the DNA strands from unfolding. But when you lose the telomeres, just like losing the little end on that shoelace, the DNA starts to open up, and then that will lead to aging and disease. So the telomere length is directly proportional to our health and our longevity. The shorter the telomere, the shorter our life, and the more likely disease. And so at first it's thought you got your telomeres at birth, and then after that you just systematically lose them as the cells divide, and there's a point where aging occurs where you've lost the telomeres. Now you're affecting the copying of the gene programs when you reproduce a cell. And that's what we believed, and that's why we said, oh, a human life has a certain lifespan. The fun part, science has now found there's an enzyme, telomerase, that increases the length of the telomere. So that if the increase in the telomere is occurring, that means the cells can divide much more frequently without getting sick or without aging. Now the question is, okay, so what is it that promotes the telomerase that allows us to live longer and more healthy? And the answer is this: it's our response to life. That when we have, most important, self-love, that we love who we are, this will activate the telomerase. Unfortunately, 80 to 90% of the people on this planet will not test positive for I love myself. And that is because of the critical nature of parenting during the first 7 years that criticize a child in an effort to make them conform. The criticisms are mainly negative, and the child downloads the negative criticism. So a child about 7, the predominant number of thoughts are very negative about themselves. Not smart enough, not good enough, not deserving, all these wonderful things like that that parents say, trying to provoke the child to be better without realizing a child under 7 is just recording what they said. You don't deserve that. A child under 7, I do not deserve. That's what I heard as a child under 7. So predominantly, most of us don't love ourselves because of the critical way parents acted as coaches, trying to spur us to be better with negative words. And we downloaded the negative. So self-love is important. But also, the next thing is gratitude for life, joy, appreciation, that you love your life. What are you saying with that thought in your head? I love my life. You're telling 50 trillion cells, this is really cool. Let's keep doing this. Let's be healthy. This is great. So you're encouraging the health of the cells, which encourages telomerase to increase it. And perhaps the most important one is service. That we have something to offer this planet, and that we're here to offer it. And that as long as we're engaged in service, then we need to stay healthier longer to complete our service. The problem is when people lose service, they've lost the meaning of life. I'm sorry, you're 65, you are now going to retire. And now I'm going to retire, what am I going to do? I have no purpose anymore. I have no service anymore. This is why there's such a dramatic drop-off in lifespan the moment people retire, because they've lost service and purpose of life. And this is why caregivers have much healthier and longer lives than people who are not caregivers. I gotta be healthy, I have to take care of somebody. And this then is very relevant to what? Telomerase activity. In other words, if you have purpose in your life, then you will be given longer, healthier life. If you have no purpose in your life, well, it was a short visit. Thank you. Come back again.
And then I love when you say that to remove stress just brings us back to neutral, but there's actually things and practices we can do that actually enhance our healing process and boost our immune system.
When we talk about health in the body, we can talk about the body has got two different directives, to be in growth or to be in protection. Relevance is two different behaviors completely, and they're mutually exclusive. For example, when a stimulus offers growth, it's a stimulus that I want to move toward and take in, like love. I will move toward love and be open and take it in. Assimilation, growth. But in contrast, if a stimulus is negative and threatening, I don't move to the stimulus, I move away from the stimulus. Do I keep myself open? No, I close myself down. What's the point? Growth, move toward the stimulus. Protection, move away from the stimulus. Growth, be open to assimilate. Protection, be closed to ward off. What's the point? You can't move forwards and backwards at the same time. You can't be open and closed at the same time. Growth and protection are mutually exclusive behaviors. So you say, okay, I get a negative perception about my life, a diagnosis. It's negative. I say, what's it going to do? I'm going to try to protect myself. So I'm going to close down my system to ward off the problem. I say, well, closing down the system is the opposite of growth, and that will actually cause illness and death. So fear causes death. And you say, well, great, I have no fear. But I say, do you have any love? You say, well, what's the difference? I say, well, love opens you up to take things in. You can grow. So if you're not in stress and you're not in love, where are you? In the middle. I go, what's happening in the middle? Nothing. You're not growing and you're not protecting yourself. If you want to enhance your life, then you have to move to the other side from fear into growth. If you want to enhance your life, images of happiness, wholeness, being part of something that's vibrant and alive, those stimuli will affect all of the growth. So you say, get rid of stress. And I go, yeah, if you get rid of stress, but you have no love or no growth, you're in the middle of nowhere. You're not growing, but you're not dying. You're not doing anything. But if you remove stress and replace it with love, then all of a sudden you completely change from a shutdown system to an open system. And you will be healthy and you will grow with it. So the problem is not just eliminating stress, but to eliminate it and replace it with something positive, loving, growth promoting.
So what is your advice for someone that's dealing with a health crisis right now or a daunting diagnosis and they need to turn their life around? What advice would you give them?
I think one of the most important aspects of understanding our life and our health is that we are not victims of our genetics as we have been programmed to believe. Because as victims, it just says you are powerless. I'm powerless, I can't control this, which leads to irresponsibility. Well, if I can't control it, then why do I even care about doing anything about it? That takes us away from the control. What we need to understand is we are in absolute control. We can change anything in our biology. You could be terminally sick with cancer, like my dear friend Anita Moorjani, whose book, Dying to Be Me, revealed after 4 years of cancer, and her body was shutting down, that she was on life support. Her oncologist called her family and said, at this stage, it's terminal and she may not come out of this coma. And if she does, it will only be a short period. She's dying right now. And Anita had an out-of-body experience. I realized that her cultural programming conflicted with her life. The conflict led to the illness. That when she resolved that conflict in this out-of-body experience and came back into a body that was not even functioning, was on a machine, and she was so emaciated that cancer lumps were sticking out of her body, within a couple of weeks of coming back out of the coma, the cancer was essentially on its way out. It's gone. Now she's completely healed. What's the relevance about that? And the fact was this: resolution of her conflicts in life as the source of her problem. And that by resolving these conflicts, she came back from a place that her oncologist says nobody comes back from, only to be, for me, the poster child for the biology of belief. Change the belief, and you can come back from death.
So ALS is like the gnarliest thing ever. Can someone turn around something as major as ALS?
They're working on, a friend of mine is actually involved with this process right now, and he's doing a scientific study, and I have literature from him and the scientific people, including others like myself, that are supporting him. And what is he showing? That it wasn't a one-way negative decline, that he could recover. And he's starting, he's standing and moving, and he's working on it to come out of it. So a death sentence has been avoided by what? His perception and his intention to heal himself. And he's against all the odds. He was in hospice, and then they kicked him out of hospice because he wasn't dying anymore. And that's because he changed just his perception of life. And this is especially true for multiple sclerosis. That is totally a mind-body psychosomatic. And a friend of mine who was in a wheelchair with a breathing apparatus and was so weak he couldn't hold his head up and sit in a wheelchair like that, changed his mind and now become a long-distance runner. And no multiple sclerosis, totally healthy. MS is autoimmune. What is autoimmune? Self-destructive. Autoimmune definition, self-destructive. So what was the point? Well, if your self is destructive, what if you change yourself? And the answer is, then you can recover. So autoimmune disease is really a consequence of our thought processes.
So they just got to get back to self-love, or
Yeah, because all the issues are why aren't they healing themselves? What's their belief? And the answer is, well, most of the beliefs are you can't heal yourself because you're not the doctor, and who do you think you are? And that takes away people's power. So we've all been disempowered by people telling us you have no power over that. You can't control your genes. It's like, that's bullshit. I usually say, that's a bunch of BS. And everybody looks at me and I go, that's belief system. You are so powerful. And yet, you can walk across hot coals, right? But you better have your mind right. You can't be in the middle and have doubt. The moment you have doubt, you'll get burned, okay? Another one that I like is down south, fundamentalists work themselves up into religious ecstasy, speak tongues, all that crap like that, right? And some of them play with poisonous snakes, snake handlers. Rattlesnakes, coral snakes, all these very poisonous snakes. Even when they get bitten, they don't have a problem. Minor league, the ones that are really cool, are the ones that drink strychnine in toxic doses with the belief that God protects them. And guess what? Drink strychnine, no harmful effects at all. It's like what? It was a consciousness. But you can't drink it and have a feeling it's going to poison you, because it will, okay? And then another one I love, I have a bunch of articles from around the world of women lifting up cars off a child, that, their own child. And it's like, well, can any of us go out in the parking lot right now and lift up a car? And the answer is probably not. Then I show a picture of a weightlifter with muscles, bulging, sweat, picking up a car. And then I show all these articles about women, mothers, picking up cars, no athletic thing at all. And what was the point? It's the belief system. Your kid's under the car. There's no belief system that says, oh, okay, you die under the car, I'll stand out here. No, I'm going to lift the goddamn car up. And they do. Point. We're so powerful, and yet our beliefs are we're not. And I go, well, that's the problem. If you believe you're not powerful, then by definition you're not. And we have disempowered people from the very beginning. And the two disempowering sources have been A, the church, disempowerment. We talk to God, you can't. So we're going to manage spirituality for you, okay? Something you already have, but we'll manage it by telling you you don't have it. And then medicine. We're going to manage your health. You can't, but we can. It's like, well, that's bullshit. As a matter of fact, cancer patients stand a better chance by not going to the doctor for their cancer than for those that do go to the doctor. Statistics. Yeah. How powerful are we? More than you could ever imagine.